Who in their right mind would want to be a CISO today, especially at a publicly traded company?
Firmly in the regulatory crosshairs with SEC disclosure rules and a growing thicket of privacy and compliance regulations.
Subject to quarterly interrogations by a well-intentioned board that may, or more likely, may not, understand the nature and the nuance of the threat landscape facing the company.
Under constant scrutiny from members of the C-suite, such as the CFO, despite the fact that cyber threats are exponentially increasing, but the budget for security most definitely is not.
Always hearing the sweet, whispering promise of vendors that can make all of this go away. If only you buy the upgraded triple titanium data ingest and support package.
Finding the strength to motivate and manage an underpaid and overworked team to defend against the latest nation-state attacks, while constantly dealing with Dave from accounts clicking on phishing emails from Microsoft.
No wonder the average CISO's employment tenure is measured in months and not years. I'm Chris Pullen, content strategist at CIO.com.
And I'm Robin Das, Executive Director at Strategy at DataB from Comcast Technology Solutions.
And welcome to Free the CISO, where, over the course of several episodes, we're delving into some of the more unique issues faced by CISOs today, sharing guidance for alleviating these issues, and, hopefully, bring up a little more time for CISOs to take care of themselves and their teams, all while improving security and compliance. So far, we've looked into the CISO's regulatory challenges, compliance, the board of directors, the C-suite, and their own security organizations. Robin, what else is there left to cover?
Thanks, Chris. We still need to cover the ABCs.
The ABCs?
Always be closing. Well, in this case, the ABC CDs.
Always be closing cyber deals?
That's right. While cybersecurity remains a big challenge for the CISOs and their companies, it is also a big business. In 2023, companies collectively spent an estimated $160 billion on cybersecurity. With double-digit growth of this market expected over the next few years, it seems like it's never been a better time to be selling cybersecurity products and services. As anyone who's ever spent time at RSA will know, every year vendors announce a whole host of shiny new products ready to tackle the biggest, baddest threats in the latest, greatest way. But from speaking to a variety of CISOs and security personnel, most companies are still just struggling with the basics. So, is all this money spent on security tools making us safer, or just creating additional complexity? And what options are available to the CISO to manage vendors and their technologies? As the head of security architecture, engineering, and innovation at Humana, as well as adjunct professor at Northwestern University for cybersecurity, I thought Partha Chakraborty could help give me some vendor management guidance. Hi, Partha. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, diving on in, if I look at something like a Gartner, the average security organization has about 10 to 15 security vendors and maybe 60 to 70 security tools. If complexity is the enemy of security, why is there so much tool sprawl? And is there a way, that you've seen to reduce this sprawl?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Robin. And this is so close to my heart. Part of my security innovation responsibility currently at Humana, or even in the past in the Wall Street companies, this is what I have been asking myself and my leaders and my team, and why there is the tool sprawl and what can be done. My overall finding in last, say, 15 plus years, working for the financials as well as healthcare company, it primarily happens because of three things. Number one, there is no clearly defined security control and target state in the organization, right? Most of the time, the organization is driven by the fire drill, either driven by an audit or a compliance certification going on, or operational issues or incidents. And as they are continuously doing the firefighting, they don't take the step back and define where are we today and where we want to go. While you're in the middle of the fire, the natural instinct is, I have a problem. No time to think about it. Let's go and solve it. The second problem is also related to this, but which is lacking the governance routine, right? You don't have the right governance programs. You don't have the right councils or vetting process to see the bills that you are paying for the tools, who are using it, for what value and benefit, are they truly using it, is there any gap. Also, when somebody thinks that there is a gap and he or she need to buy and add a new solution, then what is the process to get it onboarded? Does it go through a central monitoring process, a governance process, a central innovation framework where you first identify what is needed, then you provide the justification why it is needed?
That almost maybe goes back to your first point of like the justification is like it's an emergency, like I need it, I need it, I need it, right? And you're sort of saying like how do you balance that priority with like the governance aspect of it, and saying like, well, actually we have a framework, we have a process to kind of onboard these tools.
Absolutely. So if you follow that framework and process, it goes into the database that, okay, we purchased this tool to address these deficiencies. Next time, there could be another team, and that team may not actually know that there is already a solution which can be tapped to address their problem. And they may want to buy another vendor product solution. But if you have the right governance process in place, then it will route through that process, and that process will immediately check. You are trying to bring in control X. Control X will give you this value, whether it is a compliance requirement or your risk reduction. This is the overall value you will get. And by the way, last month we approved X amount of dollars to buy two legs, and two legs can actually cover your requirement or need. So once you have that process in place, those checks and balances will ensure there is no duplication and unnecessary purchasing, and the tool sprawl does not continue further from where you are.
And I guess the leading question that it posed in my mind was when I think about tool complexity, and like, how, like, sometimes you sort of see these tools and they're very similar sounding, but I think what you were saying is you would then map those tools, whatever a tool purports to be doing, you end up having to map that to the control or the piece of the MITRE framework, or whatever the universal system of governance or record is, and that seems to be kind of the way that you could maybe break through some of the complexity of some of these tools.
Exactly. So first, when I talked about that, there was no clearly defined strategy, and because of that, you are actually dealing with haystack, and you don't know what is there in the haystack. So every time you handle a problem, you feel like, oh, it's too much time to organize my haystack. Rather, I assume it is missing, so let's buy it. So while you are doing it, you are actually adding that mess, making it bigger. The haystack grows. So lacking that strategy can be addressed by creating a structured target state, which should be like the layers of the onion, right? You define what should be there in your perimeter layer. Then inside that perimeter layer, when you have your internal network, then you have your compute, your endpoints, right? And then you have your data, then you have your application, then you have identity. So create a layered structure of controls what you need to have in your target state. And when you before you create that, you while you are creating that journey map, you are also identifying what is there in your current state. In each layer, in perimeter, for example, you need to build a strategy layer by layer where you define what controls you need to have, and then for each control, what vendors and tools and capabilities you already have, and then what you are missing. Once you list that thing out, then you will see for a particular capability, there are a lot of overlap already existing in production. There are like 20 to 30 points check you can do against each and every vendor. And then once you have the data, then only you can make a call what to do with the overlapping space. Like you have three vendors doing the same capability. One vendor will be a divest candidate. You don't want to continue that. Another could be invest. It looks strategic. It is strategic in my priority. And the capability is compelling with better integration and better ROI and lower cost of operation. So it becomes my invest candidate. And in some cases, you will find vendors are there, but we did not tap on the full potential of capabilities.
Right. Because that's got to be a question, right? If you have these 60 to 70 tools, are you really maximizing each one of these things? And are there like these hidden or additional capabilities from tool X that you're not using that could actually cover from tool Y? And it's only when you do this controls to mapping exercise that you can actually kind of see that.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, we need to tap into data to make a better decision. And there is no shortage of data. We just need to ask the right question. First is the control. Is the control needed by a compliance requirement? Yes or no? If it is a compliance requirement, then you must use it. If it is not, then what are the other reasons? Is it information security requirement, operational ease, giving you the resiliency, or it could be anything? Once you finalize on that control, then you go to the vendor, clearly create three buckets: invest, divest, and optimize.
So we know that there's like some sort of tool sprawl, and I think the framework that you kind of gave was really helpful at was like boiling that sort of down. But for the tools that you have remaining, what are the best practices that you've seen for sort of integrating those tools? And I think you mentioned it. Like how do you integrate these tools and ensure that they're all actually working together? And how do you sort of pull out? Because I think data has a bit of a gravity, and sometimes wherever the data is created, that's where it resides. Like how do you leverage the data from different tools, and how do you sort of integrate these tools?
Yeah, that's another great question, and these are all the practical problems. But before you drive something like this, I think it has to be driven at the enterprise architecture or security architecture or the strategy department level. First, we need to define some bold statements or founding pillars, right? Whenever we buy any tool, what are the basic things which are like zero tolerance, no compromise, you must have it? Or when you make a decision whether to continue with the tool or not, these are the bare minimum criteria with no tolerance on those. We are not going to make any compromise because that will deviate us from our future target state. One of the criteria could be like it should be able to provide APIs for better integration and interoperability. The second one should be it should integrate with our existing production or operations environment. Could be our SIM, could be our data lake, could be our uh, anything XYZ, right? So it needs to have an interface, it needs to have an API, it needs to be, I mean, we need to have an operational ease to make sure if the tool provides an API, we should be able to, we have the skills and expertise to write the automation so that it can get integrated. Fourth is we must actually have a clear visibility of all access, then audit, then event log, also the utilization of the tool, and again the efficacy of the tool. Many times we buy tools, say an anti-malware product, based on the claim 99.5% of the time day zero attacks are prevented. How do we validate those claims, right? How do we validate the efficacy of the tools and systems?
And so, maybe wrapping up, one of the things I was thinking about is like some of the basic problems, think about security hygiene or asset management are still extremely prevalent and haven't been solved yet. But then how do you kind of focus on the mundane stuff when, the vendors, RSA themes, etc., are all focused on sort of the latest hot trend? Like how, is there a way to avoid, cyber tooling FOMO and retain that focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you just gave the answer part of the question, right? Do the basics right. And most of the organizations don't have time to do the basics right and just run after the FOMO. Guess what? Even if you go after the FOMO, you buy the latest EDR, XDR, MDR, NDR, whatever you call, or XSPM. That was my RSA presentation topic. X is for anything. And then SPM was for security posture management. Today, Gartner says application and data. Tomorrow, they can say mobile. And day after tomorrow, they can say anything, right? Identity or even like SIM. So, any security posture management, eventually you get influenced and you bring those tools. Those tools will also have unpatched and underpatched vulnerabilities. At the end of the day, be it your existing product suite or whatever you bring in, needs to have the right secure, locked configuration. And that can only be done with a proper set of processes and governance and practices in place. The way like I prefer to do those things is I try to create the golden standards or templates for architecture, engineering, and secure configuration. For architecture, create the right set of blueprints for every service, for every technology. Create the design patterns. So, create your use case patterns, create your blueprints, ensure your deployment follows your architectural pattern. Enable a security architecture assurance program so that you can measure the adherence of those patterns in production in a practical way, right? As opposed to coming up with those architecture and those stay in a PowerPoint and nobody follows it. Make sure those are enforced through your enterprise processes and you have the checks and balances in place through your assurance program to ensure you're adopting those. Make sure engineers cannot actually implement the thing in 5 different ways. There is only one golden mechanism to do it. This way, you can avoid the drift. So, that is the second thing, like architectural standardization, engineering standardization. The third and the final part, which is directly related to your question, is end of the day, without running after the FOMO, you need to do the basics right. And doing the basics right is ensuring all the tools and controls you deploy are secure enough running in your production environment. You don't want to run a firewall where the firewall has a backdoor open. Once you do these three things right, then you have to see your incident data to see whether the graph is going down or not. Ideally, if you do these three things right, standardizing your architecture, ensuring architecture is followed, non-standard things cannot be done. Standardizing your engineering deployment, making sure people cannot, enable a control and by mistake turn on like few different features which are not supposed to be enabled in your environment. And also ensuring the tools which are running in your production environment are locked down and completely secure following CIS benchmark, which is one of the example. You can use other as well, which is customized to your environment. Once you do these three things, then you should collect the operational and incident data for last 3 months, and you should see a sharp decline. If you are not seeing a decline, then some of the things are not done right in the previous three steps that I talked about. And then just iterate and make it better and then measure with the data. And when you see the impact that yes, the incidents are going down, that means you are not repeating the same mistake again. There can be a 0 day completely beyond your knowledge, which will always be there, right? There's a possibility, but at least things that should be in your knowledge considered as a basic hygiene, like password rotation, privilege access management, zero trust network access, secure, SIM integration, right? And all those stuff, turning on SSL v3, like you just name it. Those are the things will be properly done so that the same mistake is not repeated in your environment.
Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
While Partha had some great techniques for rationalizing tools and technology, with this shift towards fewer vendors and more expansive platforms, I wondered what was going to happen if the CISO started to put all their eggs into one basket, especially if that basket was built on a proprietary format and only compatible with other baskets from the same vendor. So I sat down with Matt Carothers, Senior Principal Security Architect for Cox Communications, and self-described Internet Janitor for his opinions. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here.
There's a great quote from Bruce Schneier. Products are useful for what they do, while security products are useful solely because of what they prevent from being done. A security product may work fine, but you have no idea if it is secure. No amount of beta testing can uncover a security flaw, ever. So with something like that, Matt, how do you ever assess a vendor properly?
Well, the short answer is you don't. The best we can do is some due diligence, some contract language, make sure they have a secure software development lifecycle, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, Bruce is right. You can't ever be 100% sure. Another issue is not just that the product itself might have a vulnerability, but maybe that the product doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And so it doesn't avoid the security problems. So many years ago, we had a SIM and it was just one monolithic product, and we fed logs into it, and it was supposed to detect bad things. And it was also supposed to help us do research. Like if there was an incident, we needed to be able to go back in time and look through those security logs. Or if we got some threat intelligence, we needed to be able to do hunting through those logs to find out if there was an issue. But we were running into problems with that product because it wasn't doing all the things it was supposed to do. It was pretty good at the real-time detection stuff, but it was absolutely terrible for the forensics. Like you'd start a query and walk away for literal hours waiting for the query to come back. So when it came time to renew that license and expand capacity on it, we decided we needed to go in a completely different direction and actually replaced it with a whole bunch of different products. So we were able to get all the functionality we needed by leaving the real-time detection piece with a traditional SIM, but then also making copies of our logs to go into we used an elastic stack. So we'd have a forensic capability. So we built a log broker to go between the logs and the SIM. So next time we want to change SIM vendors, we can just stand up the second one in parallel and make a copy of the logs instead of having to go change all of our log sources like we did the first time.
That's kind of an interesting comment that you made, that you went from like this single vendor to kind of breaking it down into multiple products, because it almost seems like a bit of an anti-pattern at the moment, because I think everyone's sort of complaining about tool sprawl and the need to sort of reduce the amount of tools that they have. And so like how do you think about that? Are you sort of going uphill when everybody else is going downhill?
Maybe. I'm not opposed to tool sprawl on principle. There are some cases where you have a group of products and each one of them does one thing really well and none of them does everything. So rather than having one product that's a jack of all trades and a master of none, maybe it makes sense to have 5 products that are all masters at what they do.
But then, how is is there not a challenge there though? In you've kind of now got these 5 tools. Like, how do you integrate those things, or how do you sort of not have to pivot between screen after screen or console after console?
Oh, absolutely. Integration is definitely a challenge. And you have to understand that there's a cost for integration. There's a cost for open source. My good friend Scott Tankey likes to say that open source is only free if your time is worth nothing.
How do you pull it all together, right? So you aren't doing this pivoting.
So we've done a couple of things. For example, with our log broker, we're normalizing all our logs. So whatever source it comes in from, we're using a combination of Logstash and Kafka and an Elastic Stack to normalize all our incoming logs into Elastic Common Schema. So regardless of what the data source is, we can build a unified dashboard out of it because the field names end up being the same thing. So for example, the source IP is always going to be source.ip as opposed to whatever it came from firewall X or firewall Y. Another thing we've done is we built an internal API that calls other tools and returns the data in ECS. So for example, we have a passive DNS vendor, and we have a vendor that checks IP addresses to see if they're VPN exit nodes. And we have tools like VirusTotal and Shodan and things like that. And so internally, we just have this one API that we wrote that queries all of those things and returns it in a normalized format.
It sounds like you guys had a lot of fun building this. Is it then like once you sort of built this sort of internal log broker, like what about sort of the maintenance and sort of the ongoing sort of management of that? Like, how do you think about that? Or is there a sort of a way in which you sort of architected it that it almost like frees you up to kind of think about other things?
Yeah, a bit of both. It absolutely was fun. And beyond being fun, or part of the fun is that it allows you to innovate. So if you've got a closed ecosystem and all you can do is what the vendor tells you can do, then where's the fun in that? One of the reasons that we got off of our proprietary SIM is because it had proprietary storage solutions. So, in order to expand storage, it would have been a big upfront cost and then licensing costs. That would have been an operational expenditure, so recurring OPEX. Whereas what our finance wants to see is a capital expenditure, which is like a one-time hardware purchase or something. An architecture like this absolutely helps you financially in other ways as well. So, for example, every commercial SIM that I know of is licensed either based on the number of events per second you're pushing into it, or the number of bytes that you're pushing into it. So the way our system works, all of our stuff goes into the log broker, but then from there, we only send stuff into the SIM where we have a defined use case for that data. So we're only sending like 10% of our logs into the SIM. So potentially you could reduce your licensing cost by 90% by implementing something like this. Also, once you get locked into a vendor ecosystem, the price is going to go up every year.
Right.
If you've written your master service agreement appropriately, there's going to be a limit on how much it can go up, but it's always going to go up. And if you're tied to that one vendor, it can be a lot of work to untie yourself. The way we've built this, we can just plug in any new vendor anytime we want, try it out, and if we like it, we can just shut off the old vendor and we're done.
When I'll read the Gartner thing of like 10 to 15 security vendors, 60 to 70 security tools, like it's only a problem if you're not using those tools in the right way.
Exactly. Buy as many tools as you want as long as each of them is doing something effectively and they're not redundant.
And then in your mind, sort of the way that you ensure that the data plane is that sort of common language to kind of ensure you're kind of getting the value from your tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we saw with the CrowdStrike issue, there is maybe an advantage to not being completely homogenous.
There are still some basic problems within security, like hygiene, that's still prevalent, or things like asset management, that always still kind of be these perennial problems. But then you come out of RSA and those themes, or there's so many hot trends. Like, how do you avoid like cyber FOMO?
Yeah, there's always a shiny object to chase. There's always something that has, I guess it's AI this time. Every product has to have Gen AI built into it somewhere.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, we've got organizations out there that don't have multi-factor authentication or things like that. It's really important to focus on the basics. You don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the other campers. And there's a lot of campers out there that are just really limping along. The trick is to pay attention to the people who are under attack and how they're responding to those attacks before it's your turn.
And how sort of in a practical way, like sometimes people don't necessarily like to broadcast the fact they're being attacked. Like, how do you do that?
Well, for me personally, I just have a lot of industry contacts. Part of my job is what we call industry engagement. So it's my job to talk to our fellow ISPs or to our government partners or to anyone else in the ecosystem.
It's like it's a very analog way to stay safe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The most effective way to share threat intelligence is not to have some flashy new platform or big data or AI or blockchain or whatever the buzzword is. The best way to get the best threat intelligence is to know people and to talk to them face to face. There is a great reluctance for people to share information about how or if they got compromised in any kind of electronic medium. Nobody wants their email to be forwarded off to a news outlet or something. Nobody wants to be sued. Nobody wants to be fined because they were a victim of a crime. So if you know somebody and they trust you and you can just sit down over beers and have a conversation, you can learn the things that you need to know.
It's kind of going back to that idea that like cybersecurity really is a team sport, but I guess the team also needs to have beers together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I was reading something that actually, we were talking a little bit about Gen AI, that now startups are starting to leverage Gen AI to automate the work of a junior salesperson. They think they can kind of get 11x more emails or uplift out of that. Is this going to exacerbate an already broken vendor sales cycle?
Oh, that's terrifying.
I thought so.
Every security vendor website looks like it was written by AI already. I defy anybody to look at any security startup's website and tell me what it is that their product actually does. The information is nowhere to be found, and it's only going to get worse with AI.
Yeah, like that's the real threat of AI. It's not actually sort of getting hacked. It's just getting, 100 more unsolicited spam emails.
Yeah, exactly. Let me tug on a thread here, which is identity. So people say that identity is the new perimeter, and that's absolutely true. It certainly applies to the threat actors who go after us. The biggest problems we face aren't 0 days and nation state threat actors, though those are certainly threats. Oftentimes, our biggest threats are social engineers. They're just people who are really good at making phone calls and sounding convincing. And AI will certainly make all of that worse. It will enable not just the vendor sales team to scale up, but also the threat actors to scale up. They'll be able to scale up their operations with phishing. They'll be able to scale up things like romance scams that they use to cultivate money mules that they can use to get money out with their BEC scams. So Gen AI. I like to say that when it comes to AI, my glass is half full. It's half full of misery and human tears. I think now that you've told me that the vendor sales teams are starting to use it, it's more like 3/4 full.
It just keeps filling.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Matt. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, Chris, when it comes to vendors, the CISO faces a dilemma. On the one hand, if they chase all the latest point solutions, it can lead to an unmanageable tool sprawl. But on the other hand, putting their faith in just a couple of vendors means a CISO security program is at the mercy and timeline of those vendors' ability to innovate.
So it sounds like, on either hand, the CISO's hands are really tied.
Well, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't try to free the CISO, and the data will set you free. As we heard from Partha, being data-driven enables the CISO to map the tools to a control framework, probably MITRE, and use data to validate gaps and the efficacy of those tools. Second, somewhat counterintuitively, Matt said that vendor sprawl is okay as long as it doesn't also cause data sprawl. By having control of the data and normalizing it, he can mix and match vendors with a data integration layer, provide defense in depth, and innovate his security program outside of a specific vendor roadmap.
Like a cyber Houdini, sounds like the CISO has escaped yet again.
Yes, and with this newfound freedom, the CISO can engage in the more analog requirements of the role, namely sharing information and best practices with other members of the security community.
And sales calls. With AI-driven sales outreach, does this mean the death of a cyber salesman?
Well, until Gen AI starts picking up the check, I think they're safe for now.
Now that we've helped free the CISO from the constraints of managing vendors, their security organizations, the board, and the regulatory burdens of their roles, in our next episode, we will be looking toward the promised land. We've highlighted ways to set the CISO free. So what could they be doing that they aren't able to do today? Instead of a constant game of hacker whack-a-mole, what does an enlightened, unburdened, forward-looking security program actually look like?
Thanks for listening to Free the CISO, a podcast by DataB from Comcast Technology Solutions. Stay tuned for our next episode on CIO.com, the number one resource serving the evolving, challenging, and demanding role of the Chief Information Officer. CIO.com provides these important decision makers with the information they need to lead their organizations into the digital-first age. The views and opinions expressed by the participants are their own and do not reflect any official policy or position of Comcast.